And we're live.
We're only on the ground.
I wish we had picked up all that stuff. Make sure you speak generally toward that area because it's gonna be hard to pick up. There's a lot of background.
Is it good at picking up sound though? How far do I need to be from
That's pretty good right there. Just as long as you speak it slightly above normal speaking voice, it should hear you pretty quick. Clearly.
Okay.
Hopefully it doesn't pick up both of our voices on both mics. But anyways, special guest, Mr. Tonto Duncan.
You
want to? I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't introduce you because you should introduce yourself. I feel like. Yeah. For the few listeners that will be listening to this, that probably already know you.
Last time got seven of them, so all seven potential. I was definitely one of them. Dan was probably one of them too.
I was one of them.
So 5, maybe our moms.
Yeah.
No. Thank you guys for having me on. I've been looking forward to contributing to the podcast with whatever topic it is. But Tonto Duncan, Mary Washington alum, class of 2015, graduated in the fall, double major with English literature and religion. Those are sort of my interests and my hobbies, as well as reading, writing, drawing cartoons, kind of all over the place. All
right.
So
I'm ready. I'm hyped now.
Religion.
This is our first guest, I think.
This
is the first guest at least that I've ever had.
He's the most qualified person to ever be speaking on here.
Yeah, probably more qualified than us.
Credentials are so much longer than ours.
Well, it depends what we talk about, because I only know, for example, people are like, oh, you read a lot. And it's like, well, I read, a lot of literary fiction. I do poetry. I do, some philosophy. It's kind of touch and go, some, psychology, depending on who the psychologist or the era is. But yeah, that's just about it. Anything that's if people are incredibly well versed in languages or international or foreign affairs, I'm kind of lost, but I'm very interested in sitting down and listening. But I'd have to all right, they said some things. I'm gonna have to go home and just look some stuff
digest
up.
this.
Yeah.
Educate myself.
Oh, that's going on right now, and this place. I should probably be more aware of that or be more well read.
Let's start here. Let's say. What's the book that represents you the most? Well, actually, we'll all three do this. How about that?
Okay.
But you can start us off.
Yeah,
I know.
Right.
I want to go last.
Okay, the book that represents me the best. That's an excellent question. That's kind of a hard one because I'm thinking of two or three novels in my head, so just kind of narrow that down.
If you can give us, how about 3? We'll go with 3.
Okay, so 3 novels that narrow it down. All right, so there's a Victorian novel by an author named Thomas Hardy, who was writing in the late 19th century, and he wrote, which was his last book because it was so controversial, that he gave it up altogether and then decided to just continue his poetry career, and it's called Jude the Obscure. And it's about Jude
the Obscure. I'm just taking notes so I can put this in the...
Yeah, Jude the Obscure, and it's about a young man named Jude who grows up in a very rural, sort of small town in the English Wessex area, which is sort of a fictional area in England. I believe it's supposed to be sort of southern England, and he just wants to learn, essentially, and he wants to better himself. He wants to be able to be a man of letters. He wants to be a scholar, and the entire novel is him trying to pursue that, but the educational institutions are telling him, no, you're a farmhand, and that's your station in life, so you'll always be a farmhand. So they never give him a chance to take a class, a chance to actually see what his capabilities are. And he's an individual that teaches himself Latin. He teaches himself Greek. He's memorized scriptures from the Bible. He's incredibly well learned, but is never given a chance. So, and he's kind of defeated multiple times throughout the novels. This idea that society has this script that's written for you.
Your destiny is predetermined.
The time and the place, your socioeconomic background and environment is supposed to dictate that this is the extent that you can sort of move in your life. And an individual that shows that I am more than capable of being in your ranks and being in your merits, but is never given that chance. It's really it's kind of depressing.
Yeah.
But
it's also, I think I can understand why you might pick that one because especially in modern times, that's sort of like a I don't know. That's everybody can sort of relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're not born into somebody who's like, your parents aren't billionaires and everything's set up for you, like you really don't have to try,
right,
or do anything,
right.
You know, this is like, this is especially a time where you come from sort of is like almost your definition to other people, but it's for those people that break that definition and are like, no, I'm going to define myself.
Yeah.
And like, no, it doesn't matter where I've come from.
Yeah.
It's about where I'm going to.
Right. And social mobility has always been like an interesting thing for me. And the artistic school or like the literary school that Jude the Obscure is usually associated with is naturalism or realism. And it's the idea that every single thing about you, the time that you're born in, the environment that you're born in, the people that you meet, the school that you go to, the friends that you make, like every little detail is you're a total of that. So it's the idea of looking at a character and how they interact, how they think, how they talk, how they move about in their own opinions and beliefs and ideologies, solely based off of the sensitive information of like born in the country, you know, parents are uneducated, but you want to be educated and you want to be ahead of your time, but to a certain extent you're allowed to write your own script.
Yeah That's interesting, especially from a young man's perspective. I think is like any other books?
Any other books?
We'll go to Jack first. Okay. Well, we'll go around again if we need to.
I was Googling mine to make sure I was getting the right one. I think it's my favorite book, but I can't even fucking remember. It's Kurt Vonnegut, Breakfast of Champions. I was remembering if it was between Cat's Cradle or Breakfast of Champions. And I don't know, like, what was the original question? What was the book that, like...
defines you the most, maybe?
Yeah, I don't know if it defines me the most, but it definitely, like, opened up a lot of new perspectives. I like all the things...
What was the name of it again?
Breakfast of Champions.
Breakfast.
It's just basically about this guy that, like, lives in, like, Mid-City, Ohio, and he, like, works at a car dealership. And it's just basically about his life. It's like everything about Kurt Vonnegut books is like the plots of them like are kind of like they get a little crazy towards the end, but they kind of seem normal. It's like the commentary that he gives about these people's lives that like he just adds random stuff at their point. It was like, oh, and this guy also liked to go home and he dressed up like a woman and like that's what his wife do and they're really into it. And, like he just adds those things that like so when you think about seeing people in rounds in public or whatever, you don't understand like. That they seem like on the surface he's like regular folk, like, you know, I work at the sandwich shop and they walk in, I'm like, oh, look at this nice little family walking in, but I have no idea like what kind of deranged, I guess what I'm trying to get is like I don't know what kind of deranged sex stuff people do, like when you walk in you just never know if you're looking at a freak. I could be making a freak sandwich today, like I could be like,
oh yeah,
I could be like putting mayonnaise on the sandwich the whole time. I didn't know that like that's a big turn on for those people, and they're like they're gonna go home and slap mayonnaise on each other and make them they're gonna dress up like me too, like they're gonna pretend like I'm the one doing it, and they're gonna tell each other that you have a good day and they want mayo and mustard on it, like but like besides that I think one of the best lines in the book are, and I'm not going to quote it directly because, you know, I just don't have that kind of ability, but it was talking about Dwayne Hoover, the guy who was the main character, and he kind of snaps halfway through the book, and he just starts doing all this crazy stuff, and like, Kurt Vonnegut just wrote, it wasn't that he wanted to do these things, it was the bad chemicals in his brain telling him to do it, and I was like, oh shit, like, that kind of... I don't know, puts things in perspective. You think people do like really messed up stuff, or like, you know, when people are having a rough time, you just gotta realize that it's probably not necessarily what they want to do. I don't think people want to be like that or act the way they do when they hurt other people purposefully or stuff like that. It's just like what he said, bad chemicals in your brain making you do that. And you kind of take that perspective, you realize that people are actually all really similar. We just, you know, have different chemical makeups in our brain, and that's, you know, causes us to act differently and do different things. I don't think, you know. I think we had a conversation one time about like what percentage of the population of Earth we thought was evil. Like,
yeah, what did we come up with?
I think it was like 20%.
20% of just, yeah, 20% of people are just bad.
20% of people are just like fucked up. Like okay, that kind of goes off my point that I think they're fucked up, but like they're just like bad people, and you know they're like Joker characters. They just want to watch the world burn. And
but is that that's interesting? Is because like is that because of a chemical imbalance, like you say, or is that like nature versus nurture type thing? You know, like, are these people like crazy from birth, or like, you know, do they had fucked up parents, or like they went to the wrong school and then they
don't
went
have
off
to
the
be
rails?
Exclusive. There can be a combination or a concert of like.
That's the weird
this.
thing is like sometimes, you know, you think about like these crazy people, like for instance, like the guy who shot up the Pulse nightclub in Orlando.
Yeah.
Like you know, nobody really knows, like, everybody only heard of him that night. Mm-hmm. But, like, you have no idea what happened up in all the 29 years or whatever, how old he was up until then. And it's, like, it's weird to see, like you said, like, this person you're making a sandwich for, like, you don't know what they're going home to. Yeah. Like, if they're completely, like, weirdo sex swing, like, you know.
I always hear about everyone I meet, that they're all just closet freaks. Yeah.
Just like, I feel like if you take that perspective that everybody's weird, then it might be better.
Yeah.
Because, like, then you don't expect the best for people, or the best out of people all the time, because then you'll just be disappointed by people all the time.
It's always the ones, like, the most vanilla, you know, they come in, they get, like, a tuna salad, and they're, like, really conservatively dressed, and they have a cross on. I was like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You're going home to some weird shit.
I just always that's my gauge for how kinky I think they are. But besides
what their toppings on their sandwiches are.
Yeah, I tell a lot about people about what sandwiches they order.
Yeah,
they walk in, like, you can see like two big guys walking in, like, you know, working construction workers, and we already like, all right, two big meatballs walking in right now.
Yeah. No, literally, they want to.
The sandwich before the guy fucking comes up to the counter, because I already know. Like, I need a meatball. I was like, you want bacon on that bitch, don't you?
You want double meat?
You want double meatballs and bacon. I want to go have heartburn for the rest of the afternoon. That's my plans. I guess we take it in the sense of, like, you know, 20% of people being evil. If a lot of people derive pleasure from hurting other people, you know, like, what are sadist, is that what it is?
Yeah.
I guess that could fall under the trend of, you know, of bad chemicals in the brain, because if they're getting, like, you know, dopamine and all that shit in their head, is like, and that's coming from hurting people. It's like
it's a weird trick.
So for us, we're like, they just like hurting people because they're fucked up. It's like, well, you know, their brains are just kind of different. I get a lot of pleasure when I eat ice cream. But I think so, like, you know, but if someone came up to me and was like, oh, you shop eat ice cream, it's like really bad for people, you're hurting people when you do that. I think Louis C.K. had something like that one time where he talked about he was talking about how molesting children, which must be the best thing ever, or like people that are like for people that do that, like, he's like it's like for like
I remember that joke.
I'm kind of painting him as something else right now, like, if I don't explain the entire thing, but there was the idea that, like, if people, like, they know the trouble they can get into and they know the risk they're taking, but they can't stop it. So he's like, it just must be the best thing ever. Like, he's like, I really like eating Mars bars. Like, he compared it to that. But he's like, if someone told me I would go to jail, you know, for 20 years for eating Mars bar, you know, I'd have second thoughts about it. But he's like, that must be the best thing ever for those people. So I guess it's just whatever is congruent with what society thinks is normal or deems as normal is what we, you know, distinguish what is good.
Yeah.
And if you deviate from that, then it's considered bad. So maybe it's wrong of us to say 20% of people are bad.
Yeah, because that comes from our own, like, you know, very bubble perspective of, like, what goes on in the world.
Yeah.
Is like, you know, I like to think we're all pretty good people, but, like, you know, maybe we're wrong.
It's hard because it's like a cardboard cutout of morality.
Yeah.
And it's like a two-dimensional, like, good and bad. And it's like, all right, well, if I think something is evil or I think someone's evil, never ever do I usually, like, interrogate, like, well, then what is good?
Yeah.
Like, if I have to then see, like, point a finger and say this is evil, I then have to understand the relationship to what I think is good and what I've been taught is good. Yeah. And what's, you know, like a regular convention for, you know, quote unquote goodness. But a lot of people don't do that. It's like, oh, we can all sit here and agree what evil is, but we're like 20-something-year-old like American males that are college educated, and so our morality,
we don't speak for everybody is the thing.
And we can't speak for like a whole, but a lot of the time, like, our, you know, politicians or people in authority, teachers, parents, when you're younger, they are the mouthpieces of, like, this is good and this is evil.
They are gods to you.
Like, they are. They're infallible.
It's also because we live pretty comfortably as well. Like, regular problems that, like, you know, animals have, like, you know, not dying every day and eating, you know, finding where your food's gonna come from, where your water's gonna come
like
from,
survival.
all that. Survival. Just, you know, surviving. That's not even a problem for us. Like, it's a luxury we've enjoyed ever since.
Right. Animals don't have to think about, like, you know, what I'm doing is good or what am I doing is bad.
Yeah. They just do it.
But
like, we start taking away those things from us, and we have to actually start working for that stuff again. Then. I think we'd be less concerned with morality and more concerned with survival. In that sense, does that make us evil? Does that make us, like, I mean, or does that just make us animals?
Yeah. Because it's hard to say, because people always say, like, oh, well, humans are like creatures of habit, or like, you know, even to say that we're creatures relates us to, like, animals.
Yeah.
But, like, are we really animals? Like, we're so far removed from nature.
We are. That, like, I mean, like, as living organisms on this planet, we are animals, but we're we have like that social aspect to us, like because we're social creatures. We create institutions and systems that are based off of making a society and a civilization, which separates us completely from animals. Although we can look at multiple species that do socialize, that do have hierarchies, but to the extent that we've created, categorizations of like race and racism, sexuality, just like our conscious thought. If you sit down and like, for example, like
racism.
If we sit down and say like, I know what consciousness is, but if you like ask me how to like define it, I'm at a loss for words, and I think that's something that's so unique to being a human.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know, to a certain extent, we've like evolved beyond being just a basic instinctual animal, but like there are still moments of like, it bothers me because I don't know how to explain it. If I meet a group of people, that instinctual, like, all right, this person hasn't wronged me or like has said anything, but I get weird vibes from them.
Right.
That's like
the whole vibes.
Animals do that.
Yeah. It's
like
instinctual.
When dogs like size each other up.
Yeah.
And it's so weird because I catch myself like, is this something that's like a base instinct of mine?
It is.
When I
mean,
dislike someone.
Yeah, I completely agree that it is because like. That's also because I have no other way of defining it.
Yeah.
It's because, like, like you said, when you meet a new person, you're kind of like, you're not, like, outrightly, like, nice to them.
Yeah.
You're just nice to them because, like, it's good to be, it's good to be nice to people that you don't really know and, like, give them a chance, I guess.
Right.
Like, before you judge them, even though you're judging them, like, as soon as you look at them. That's also, like...
You can't turn it off, though. It's like, what makes us humans is that we do that. And that's just, like, if we all have blindfolds on, then maybe, Blind people are probably the only ones that don't...
Yeah, that's an interesting
people,
point.
It would be better off if everyone was just blind.
Yeah.
I mean, the world would look different. We wouldn't know. But it would be like a weird different place.
But that's interesting because I had this conversation with a friend of mine like a few years ago about like blind people and race. Like if you've been blind your whole life, you can't even like, I mean, I'm just guessing, like you can't even understand what the difference is between black and white.
Right.
Literally, like, you don't know the differences between people.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know, because, especially nowadays, because racism is such a hot topic, like...
Understatement.
Yeah. That, like... that, like, they hear this conversation going on, but they can't even, like, they're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah,
because you can't even like describe what. No, it's like one of them is darker than the other ones, and it's like, well, what do you mean by darker?
Yeah.
It's like, well, it's like they're different, all right?
Yeah.
And we're gonna make assumptions based off that, and
that's some exercise that I feel like everybody should have to go through to realize that like race doesn't matter. Is to try and like describe race to a blind person that's been blind their whole life.
Yeah.
It's like, well, there's these two different, or there's like these many different like races, but they're like still human. But they look different, so like we kind of subconsciously, and then you kind of go through all that, and you're like, oh fuck, this doesn't make any sense.
This sounds like really silly. This makes no sense at all.
Oh yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's something that
I don't know why we do it, but like we do it. Like even if you don't like it, you still kind of do it.
You have to play.
Yeah.
Something that's awesome. I don't know if it was published in 2013 or 2012, but there's a novel called Americana that's by
I think I've heard of that.
Yeah, Chimamanda Adichie, and she's from Nigeria, and the character Afemlu in the novel is also from Nigeria. Gets the opportunity. I believe she is in her, she's a young adult. She's maybe 18, 19. She gets the opportunity to move over here to America to, get a job, go to college here. And she starts this blog, and its foundation is what it's like to be a non-American black. And so there's multiple moments when she's talking about, since she was a little girl, being an African, she knew she was black. As a color, she knew her skin was dark. But there was no context, implication, history, like, being treated or like assumptions being made based off of that. Coming to America and our sensitive relationship with race, and then being assumed that she's an African American, and just having to understand that like this black skin means a lot more here in America. That it's like I have to put on the clothes of race. So like if I'm eating watermelon in public, this is very different from me being in Africa eating watermelon, because someone on the street's not going to scoff at me or like laugh
or something.
Or like eating some the relationship between like food and racism is so fascinating.
Yeah.
It's a very strong. Like I remember growing up in middle school, like everyone loves fried chicken. I feel like fried chicken is something that like a lot of individuals indulge in. Yeah. But I have to like think like.
All right, so cut out. But something you were talking about going to just start at the part where you're talking about your friend's family.
Yeah. So in middle school, I started going to church with my friend's family, and I got very involved in their youth groups. And they were, it was predominantly white. It was myself and maybe, 2 individuals that were Hispanic, but it was a youth group of maybe 20-something. But being at events that food is catered and fried chicken is there, and having to shy away from, like, I can't eat fried chicken in public because of the stipulation, someone's going to make a joke, someone's going to say something, and because it had happened before. Yeah. So this idea of, because I'm black, certain foods are symbols for me. Like I can't just, I don't have the luxury or the privilege to sit down and eat like watermelon in the summer or fried chicken anytime. I feel like someone's watching me or someone's waiting. So I feel like I have to eat, certain foods behind closed doors, or I have to feel that, okay, if I eat this, I have to lie and say I don't enjoy it. Because this idea of, I'm black, that means you like these certain foods. There's this history of certain foods. There's this joke, behind certain foods. And it's ridiculous. Yeah. It's absurd that race even comes down to what I decide to eat for dinner.
Yeah. Holy shit.
Yeah. It's something that's very real. And a lot of Americans are unaware of that, or a lot of white Americans are unaware of that these, harmless race jokes that individuals make, fried chicken jokes, jokes about, what can a pizza do that like a black father can't feed a family of 4. These very strange jokes that aren't meant to harm when people tell them, but it's kind of like, all right, great. Like I am now how I behave and how I eat is being fed into this ridiculous stipulation of this is what like a caricature of a black person looks like, and it sucks.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I was just thinking like chicken nuggets are fried chicken.
Yeah.
Everybody eats chicken nuggets, and like you can be black and like
yeah.
It really says anything, but it's like if it's in the shape of like a drumstick or a wing or something.
Yeah.
Like people are like,
it's in a bucket.
You're black and you're eating fried chicken.
Yeah, it's so weird.
God, that sucks because fried chicken is just so delicious.
Fried chicken is something that a lot of people like. It's
like
just delicious.
One of the best American foods. We don't do food that well here in this country in comparison to other cultures, but we've nailed it on the fried chicken because that shit, you can port that anywhere, and you can have Koreans eating that, and they like, because they have they introduce American restaurants over there a lot, and sometimes they're hit or miss, but I feel like you can port fried chicken anywhere, and they're not gonna be like, fuck this shit, this is terrible. They're going to know it's American because it's greasy and fried.
Because, like, KFC and, like, McDonald's, well, mostly, like, KFC is, like, one of the biggest restaurants, or fast food restaurants in, like, Asia.
Is it really?
Yeah. Like,
oh, wow.
KFC's everywhere.
Oh, wow.
Think about
China, I think it's close to, I don't want to say it's, like, bigger than McDonald's, but it's definitely, like, close to as big as McDonald's.
Damn.
And that poses problems in itself of having them eat, places like booming places like China eating meat now, because it already takes so much meat to feed America. Like, if everyone in China ate like as much meat as we do, like we're gonna have to start slaughtering way more fucking cows and chickens. We're gonna have to colonize Mars just to put cows and chickens on it, just so we can fucking chop them down every day and shoot them down a hypertube to Earth. So that we can have, more Big Macs.
Interesting vision for the future.
Hey, Elon Musk should get right on that shit. Figure out how to get the hypertubes to shoot the meat down to us. Fucking hire me. I'm unemployed right now. I love that.
Well, I'm curious for you, Daniel. What's a book that represents you well? Do you think?
Hold on, I'm gonna come back.
On the website.
Check.
Okay,
we're good. Favorite book. I'm gonna give you like 2 at least. So first one is
you read more than a book.
First one is Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway.
I love that. I love that novel.
Because it sort of like reminds me of like Catcher in the Rye for some reason. But young man, struggling to like sort of define himself like both professionally and like in his private social, type in those lives, and but he seems like he's in love with this girl, and I'm blanking on the names.
Lady
but
Brett Ashley.
Yeah. And I forget the guy's name. What's the guy's name?
Is it Jake Barnes. Is it Jacob Barnes?
No. I don't think so.
I can't remember.
Anyways, names don't matter.
Yeah.
But if you've read it, you've figured out, by now that I'm an idiot, and you know which ones I'm talking about. But anyways, he like.
I think you're doing great.
But he's like, I guess at one point before the book started, he was in love with this girl, and then for some reason it ended. The relationship ended, and his life like sort of fell apart, and then she ends up like starting to date this other guy. And I guess they're not like technically together, but the main character is like always envious, and is like, damn, like I should get my stuff together because I either want to like get her back in my life or like I just want to get my stuff together because like I owe it to myself to do that. And but at the same time, like she kind of like strings him along.
Yeah, well, it's hard because he's impotent.
Yeah,
he was a World War I soldier, and he's impotent. So there is this wall of I can't sexually be with you, but I have to watch you be with all of these men. Right. But you'll come back to me and like be emotionally with me.
Yeah, sort of like pities him in a way. So it's just it's really sad, but like I don't know, depicts the picture of sometimes like what I've experienced in my life. So
minus the impotence, I imagine.
Yeah.
That could be a whole other subject.
Right. Yeah, we won't get into that right now.
Get into a real raunchy podcast.
But I had a second book. I forget what it was. It was I forget. Anyways, but let's go back to consciousness though, because I didn't have the chance to mention this, but I read 2 books recently by John Lilly. He's like he was a scientist from like the 50s and 60s, but like he was also a psychonaut, so he did a lot of like psychedelic drugs, obviously during the 50s, 60s, 70s. Oh yeah. And he actually at one point was into like deprivation tanks, which is like you go into this tank with like a ton of salt in it, so you end up floating, so you get sensory deprivation like throughout your entire body. And it's all like pitch black in there as well, so like it's kind of like doing drug almost. And he's always into like altered states of consciousness, but he always studied dolphins. So like he would do acid and then like get in a sensory deprivation tank and have the dolphins like the sound from the pool like funneled into the deprivation tank.
Oh wow, okay.
So like he realized that like he was one of the first to realize that, like dolphins are probably the smartest animal, like other than humans, I guess. But yeah, they are as smart or slightly behind us in terms of consciousness and intelligence, because they can like for instance, they can like communicate over like 500 miles using their sonar or whatever.
Oh, that's insane.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it goes back to like what we define consciousness as, because like we might define it in saying like, well, you kind of have like a self-reflection of like yourself. You kind of like know that you're alive and like all these other people are alive, and like you define things like that. But that dolphins could also have like the same thing, even though they don't use like the same language as us. So that language barrier sort of like gets in the way, because we can communicate with each other very easily. I mean, at least so we can like speak with each other. I don't know if we can communicate.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about consciousness in terms of humans communicating. Language is a tool. That's how we're able to express our needs and wants. If I'm thirsty and I need water, I can say, Daniel, can you get me a glass of water? And if you just take it to the next step of, say, I'm having like a hard time in my life with something, or I'm feeling a certain way, I can only articulate how I can express how I feel, and I can say that out loud to you, and you can listen to everything that I'm saying. I can say, Daniel, Jack, I'm having a hard time, or X, Y, and Z is going on, and you can understand to a certain extent, but you can't feel what I'm feeling in the way that I feel it. So there's a huge that's where like the wall between individuals happen, and it's kind of like, all right, there's this giant glass wall between Jack and I, and he can my lips are moving, but can he actually understand what I'm saying? And it's like, it's bizarre, and it can get frustrating, and that's when people always say, sorry if you're not understanding what I'm saying, or it's really hard for me to speak right now, because you can just be like a jumbled mess of I'm feeling all these things, and you're not quite getting exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I always thought that that music kind of broke down that barrier a lot, in the sense that like and that's what artists are in general. It's like expressing yourself in ways and stuff. Like when you have those feelings and those modes of consciousness, and you want other people to experience that, and like maybe you can talk about it. I think that's the most common way, like you're saying, or most common tool. But the other tools are just you can create art, or you can make music. It's like I feel like Kurt Cobain was like, it feels so angry in my mind. And he's like he can sit there and be like, I'm so angry, I'm just so mad all the time. It's like I can be like, yeah, dude, totally, you're really mad. I get it. You're probably pissed about everything. And he's like, I'm so mad, and that only gets us so far. But then when he gets up there and he fucking like shreds his guitar, and like Dave Grohl's banging on the drum, and he's like, fucking, everyone sucks. Like, everyone shouldn't die. I'm like. When he's up there, he does a song on was it Nevermind, Rape Me? He's like, rape me, and I'm just like, I'm like, wow, this guy's like really, he's got a lot of bad stuff going on.
It's weird because you have to kind of use those metaphors and those like rhyming schemes, even like in music at least, like to sort of even get your point more across than just conversation. That we could never even like. There's songs that I could play, and like that would evoke that feeling in me that I could never even express in words. Yeah. And like I don't understand how that works. We
have to rely on like metaphor and like symbols in terms of kind of having like a common language. That's like Jack said, that's what art does really well. Something that I like with consciousness that writers as like literary artists have done is we hit like a really weird moment in the 20th century where writers are trying to express like we don't think in like full sentences. You read novels in which a character is, I'm hungry today. I'm going to get up and walk outside and go to the store and get what I need, period. We don't think like that. So when you get writers like, James Joyce and like William Faulkner, and stream of consciousness becomes a thing. And it's frustrating to a reader, but we don't think coherently like that. Especially with Faulkner, when you get words that aren't punctuated, words like don't and can't don't have their hyphens, commas aren't used, there's no parentheses to tell you that we're entering like a whole separate thought. It's just there, and it's a big mass globs. Words are repeating themselves, there's a rhythm to it. We think in patterns and like repetitious and like rhyming patterns.
I think that's perfect to say that like it's frustrating. Like if somebody were to read Faulkner or James Joyce or anything like sort of stream of consciousness like that, they'd probably get really frustrated. Like even if you were, an English major or something, I'm sure you still get frustrated.
Absolutely.
And like, but that frustration is exactly what he's trying to do, is because he's like, well, yeah, because he like, if you think, this is like as close as we can get to like how humans might think in these incomplete sentences where like nothing makes sense. But that's exactly how we think. So like it's just sort of
it's the most purest form.
It's just really, like no, this is how you think. So you are frustrated in this other way, like not reading books and just in your daily life.
The frustration is like the greatest difficulty with communication when you read it and you're like, what? I'm frustrated, I don't understand this. It's like, you're getting it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's what you, that's right.
It's hard. I think that the art is the best for it. Well, we're talking about communication is like one of the greatest tools for it. But I think, one of the benefits that art has is that you can put something out there and it means something to you, when you do a painting or you put out a song or something like that, and it has meaning to you, and someone else looks out there and they may understand you. Like there may be overlapping circles, like a Venn diagram, where you guys both are understanding some of the same emotions, some of the same feelings, some of the same modes of consciousness, but in a sense there's stuff that he meant that you're not going to get, and there's stuff that you got from it that he didn't intend. But because you can look past that and both look at it and be like, wow, I understand it, that kind of it gives you a buffer for misunderstanding, because you're both like, I get it, and even though you don't get it, you still get it. It's kind of a weird way to put that, because like
even if you're frustrated, you're still getting it.
You're still getting it because you're understanding that. One of the greatest things I understand about that is that you're not going to fully be able to understand someone. So the fact that in that Venn diagram you have that little section that overlaps with each other, that's like within itself perfect. Like that's like that's all you need. Maybe you don't need the other stuff. Like fully understanding someone else would be a fucking nightmare. Yet people think it's a good idea to decide when you're 20 to get eloped for the rest of your life. All right. Get within someone else's head for like 50 years until you die. I just don't. Granted, I'll probably do it, but like because everyone keeps telling me I should. But it
that's
just
for another
weird.
podcast.
Like, that's all. I want to get into people's head. I want to get to this person's head and know them better and everything like that. It's like, dude, enough trouble in my own head.
Yeah, maybe in like 20 years, but like not right now.
Something else with consciousness that I think is really cool is there's the world around us. There's the reality, sort of like the physical world of I can touch this table that's right here in front of me, but there's also the world that's going on inside of my head and my imagination.
Yeah.
And in terms of, and that's where humans can take how we process data or information.
False memories.
Or it's like two complete different things that are unrelated to each other. I internalize it and they become forcefully married. Like when you get, and this is not to rag on, religion, or when people try to find inherent meaning in things. That's them taking something that's unrelated to something else and they're trying to reconcile that. They're trying to create order out of like chaos. And that's something that we do on a day-to-day basis. I trip and fall. There's a reason that I trip. Outside of there's something in my way that's there, but this idea of everything happens for a reason. And everyone has their own like sub-content or context on how they read into that. Yeah. And for some odd reason, they expect everyone else to believe that same way. And so we all see the world differently. I can point to something that says that's the color blue. We can all agree it's blue. But are we actually seeing the exact
are we saying the
same
thing?
Consciousness is very unique and it's so idiosyncratic with who you are and what you see. But we have to somehow, language is the way to do it, unify for us to all agree on something so we can move forward. That's frustrating.
Yeah. And the other even more frustrating thing about that is like that may never happen. Yeah. Like I'm just gonna give this example again, but like getting past racism is like, as long as we can see color, I don't know if that'll ever happen.
Well, it's the weird thing because when I was watching that, is her name Tommy? What's her last name? Lauren. When in the Trevor Noah video that was going viral and everyone was sharing it on social media, and it was incredible because it was a dialogue. They weren't yelling at each other. Right. They were sitting. And Trevor Noah, I mean, he was a champion throughout that video to be able to say, Tommy, what you're saying and the platform in which you're speaking it is inconsistent from, her trying to tie the Black Lives Matter movement with the KKK. But in terms of her saying, well, I'm not, I don't like being called racist because, I'm trying to understand the world around me, and maybe the things that I'm saying can be aligned with racism. I don't see color. And Trevor, I believe he had a response that was, there is no problem seeing color. Individuals that say, I don't see color, believe that there's a problem seeing it. And his response is, there's no problem seeing color. The problem comes from what you do or how you treat people based off of color.
Right. Yeah.
Color blindness, I remember early high school when that was sort of, I heard that for the first time. And it sounded so right. It sounded logical.
It's like, we should all be.
Me for flesh and blood as a human being. But as I got older, it's like you're ignoring some facts that my identity is black. And I have pride in that. And there's certain aspects in how I live my life that are tied to a larger culture and a larger community. That's great. You should support that and be happy that I can move around in a black body. But for you to say that I want to whitewash that or I want to ignore that is really hurtful. But a lot of individuals don't understand that because they're they're afraid to say by seeing color. That they're somehow racist. That I am racist. That if I forget about it altogether, then that's me being progressive. But I thought that was a really good response from Trevor Noah.
And on that, we got to go. Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you for having me.